My name is Alaric Marsh. I'm 63 years old, and I live here in Lexington, Kentucky. Today I want to share something that shattered my heart forever. That Friday I came home early from a business trip. Wanted to surprise my family. But when I opened that front door, I heard sounds coming from upstairs that made my stomach drop. I climbed those stairs with my heart pounding, and when I opened that bedroom door, what I saw destroyed everything I believed about trust and family. If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, stay with me through this story of betrayal, but also about finding the strength to rebuild your life. Before I continue this story from Alabama to that devastating Friday drop, a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Your support means everything to me. But before I get to that moment that changed everything, I need to tell you who I was before my world came crashing down. 35 years ago, when I was 28 years old, I lived in rural Alabama, in a small farming community where cotton fields stretched as far as the eye could see. My father worked those fields from sunrise to sunset, picking cotton with calloused hands that told the story of 3 generations of hard work. We were humble folks, never had much money in our pockets, but we always had food on the table and the kind of love that holds Southern families together through thick and thin. Our little house sat on the edge of town with a front porch where my mama would shell peas in the evenings while my daddy told stories about his own father's farming days. The paint was peeling, the floorboards creaked, but that house was filled with something money can't buy, genuine warmth and the values that built America. We believed in working hard, treating people right, and keeping your word no matter what. Sundays after church, the whole community would gather in the town square. The older men would play checkers under the shade of ancient oak trees, while the women shared recipes and caught up on neighborhood news. I was a young man then helping my father in the fields and dreaming about someday having a family of my own. Life was simple, but it had that sweet taste of authentic living that seems so rare these days. The work was backbreaking, I won't lie to you. Every morning before dawn, I'd be out there with my father loading cotton into trucks that would take it to the gin. My hands were rough, my back ached, but there was dignity in that work. We were feeding America clothing, America, building something real with our sweat and determination. But deep down, I knew Alabama was too small for the dreams I carried. If I wanted to build the kind of life I'd been dreaming about, I needed to find opportunities in a bigger place. Still, those Alabama days shaped who I became. They taught me the value of honest work, the importance of family, and the belief that a man's word is his bond. It was during the annual Harvest Festival in October when my destiny changed forever. The whole town came alive with music, the smell of barbecue filling the air, and families celebrating another successful cotton season. I was walking with my buddies laughing at their jokes and enjoying the festivities when I saw her across the crowded square and everything else just faded away. She was standing near the bandstand where local musicians were playing old country songs that made your heart ache with their beauty. The whole festival was alive with the sounds of fiddles and guitars, children laughing as they ran between the food booths, and the rich aroma of pulled pork and cornbread that made your mouth water. Paper lanterns strung between the trees cast a warm glow over everything, and for a moment it felt like stepping into a Norman Rockwell painting of perfect American life. But all of that faded into background noise when I saw her. She was 20 years old with auburn hair that caught the lantern light, like spun gold, wearing a simple blue dress that matched her eyes perfectly. She was laughing with her friends, and when she smiled, I swear every light in that festival seemed to shine brighter. My buddies noticed me standing there like a statue and started pushing me toward her, saying, "Come on, Alaric, go talk to her." But I was so nervous my tongue felt tied in knots. Finally, I gathered every ounce of courage I had and walked over. "Excuse me, miss," I said, my voice shaking like a schoolboy's. "Would you honor me with a dance?" She looked up at me with those blue eyes that reminded me of Alabama's summer skies, and when she said yes, I felt like I could conquer the world. Her name was Rosalind, and we danced to every song that band played that night. With each step, each turn, I felt my heart filling with a joy I'd never known existed. When the music finally stopped, we found ourselves sitting on a bench under the old oak tree, talking until the sun painted the horizon pink with dawn. She told me about her dreams of having a big family, a house with a garden full of flowers, and I promised her right then and there that someday I'd give her all of that and more. The courtship that followed was something straight out of a storybook. Every Sunday after church, I'd walk her home carrying her prayer book and listening to her talk about everything and nothing. We'd sit on her family's front porch while her parents watched from the window, sharing our hopes and fears like young people in love have done for generations. Those were beautiful days filled with shy glances and smiles that were worth more than all the gold in Fort Knox. 6 months later, I knew I couldn't live another day without her. I saved every penny I could working extra hours in the cotton fields until my hands bled just to buy her a ring. It wasn't much, a simple gold band with a small diamond. But when I got down on one knee in that same spot where we'd first danced and asked her to be my wife, she cried tears of joy and said yes without hesitation. But Alabama was a small place with limited opportunities. If we wanted to build the future we'd dreamed about together, we needed to go somewhere with better jobs and more possibilities. I'd heard about work in Kentucky, good-paying jobs in the auto plants around Lexington, a chance to make something of ourselves. It scared us both, leaving everything we'd ever known, but we were young and in love and ready to take on the world together. With our family's blessings and our hearts full of hope, we decided that after the wedding, we'd start our new life in Kentucky, in a city that would become our home forever. We got married in the little white church where both our families had worshipped for generations. It was a simple ceremony, but filled with more love than any fancy wedding you'd see today. Rosalind wore her grandmother's wedding dress altered to fit her perfectly, and I wore the only suit I owned, pressed and cleaned until it looked almost new. The whole community came out to celebrate with us, bringing covered dishes and homemade gifts that meant more than expensive store-bought items ever could. After the reception in the church fellowship hall, with everyone dancing to the same fiddle music, where we'd first met, we said our tearful goodbyes to everything we'd ever known. Our families hugged us tight, pressing envelopes with what little money they could spare into our hands, and promised to write every week. My mama cried like her heart was breaking, but she knew we had to follow our dreams. The drive to Lexington, Kentucky took us 2 days in my old pickup truck, loaded down with everything we owned, which wasn't much. A few pieces of furniture, our clothes, our wedding gifts and hopes, bigger than the Kentucky sky we drove under. When we finally reached Lexington, we were amazed by how big it seemed compared to our little Alabama town. The streets were busier, the buildings taller, and everywhere we looked, there were signs of opportunity. We found a tiny one-room apartment on the south side of town for $400 a month. More money than I'd ever spent on anything in my life. But it was clean and safe, and most importantly, it was ours. That little room became our whole world. Rosalind made curtains from fabric scraps and cooked meals on a hot plate that would make your mouth water. Every night we'd sit on our second-hand couch and plan our future, dreaming about the house we'd buy someday. I got hired at the Ford assembly plant just outside of town, working the morning shift installing engines. The work was hard and the hours were long, but the pay was better than anything I could have made back in Alabama. Every morning before sunrise, I'd kiss Rosalind goodbye and head off to work, coming home tired but proud that I was building something. Not just cars, but our future together. We saved every penny we could. Rosalind took in sewing to bring in extra money, working late into the night, mending clothes for neighbors. We never ate out, never bought anything we didn't absolutely need. Every dollar went into an old coffee can we kept hidden in our closet marked Our House Fund in Rosalind's careful handwriting. Those first years tested us in ways we'd never imagined. Winter in Kentucky was colder than anything we'd known in Alabama, and there were nights when we'd huddle together under every blanket we owned, dreaming of warmer days. But we never lost faith in each other or in the dream that kept us going. 5 years of sacrifice and determination finally paid off. We'd saved enough for a down payment on a little 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, not far from the plant. It cost $85,000. A fortune to us then. But when the realtor handed us those keys, we both cried tears of pure joy. We finally had our nest, our piece of the American dream, bought and paid for with honest work and unwavering love. A year after we got the keys to our little house, God blessed us with the greatest gift of all. When the midwife placed our baby daughter in my arms, I felt a love so powerful I thought it might split my heart wide open. She was perfect with eyes as blue as her mother's. We named her Melody because from the moment she was born, she filled our house with the sweetest music we'd ever heard. Rosalind was a natural mother, singing lullabies and reading stories, even before Melody could understand words. I'd come home from the plant covered in grease, but the moment I heard that little girl's laughter, all the tiredness would melt away. We'd sit on the front porch evenings, Melody on my lap, feeling like we had everything we could ever want. We raised Melody with the same values that had shaped us back in Alabama: respect for others' hard work and the belief that your word is your bond. Sunday mornings found us at the Methodist church down the street. Melody in little dresses Rosalind sewed by hand, learning about faith and community from good people who became our Kentucky family. As Melody grew, she inherited the best of both of us. She had her mother's gentle spirit and quick mind combined with my determination. She excelled in school, bringing home report cards that made us burst with pride. Her teachers said she was special, not just smart, but kind to other children, always helping someone struggling. The teenage years brought challenges, but Melody never gave us serious trouble. While other kids got into mischief, she focused on studies and helped around the house. She worked part-time jobs during summers, saving money and learning the value of earning her own way. We taught her that independence was important, but family came first. When Melody turned 18, she got a job at an insurance office downtown. She was bright, professional, and quickly earned everyone's respect. We were proud when she decided to stay living at home, not because she couldn't make it alone, but because she wanted to help with expenses and be close to family. The years flew by like pages in a book. Melody grew into a beautiful, capable woman who could handle anything life threw at her. By 30, she was making good money. As an office manager, had her own car and savings account, but still chose to live with us. She'd help Rosalind with cooking and me with yard work, and we'd spend evenings watching television or playing cards around the kitchen table. Friends would ask when Melody was getting married and moving out, but we never pressured her. We figured when the right man came along, she'd know it. Until then, we were blessed to have our family together. 3 generations of love and support that had carried us from those cotton fields in Alabama to this good life in Kentucky. Looking back now, those were the golden years of our family. We had everything we'd dreamed of and more. A beautiful home, financial security, and a daughter who made us proud every single day. Melody was 30 years old, independent and successful, but still our little girl who filled our house with music. If someone had told me then what was coming, what kind of man would soon walk through our front door and change everything forever, I never would have believed them. But that's exactly what happened 5 years ago when our perfect family life was about to meet someone who seemed like an answer to our prayers. That someone was introduced to our family 5 years ago when Melody was 30, and I thought she might stay single forever. One Sunday after church, my daughter came home with a smile I'd never seen before. The kind of smile that only comes when a woman has fallen in love. "Dad, Mom," she said, her eyes sparkling like diamonds, "I want you to meet someone very special." His name was Jasper Cross, and he was 35 years old, working as a construction engineer for one of the biggest development companies in Lexington. From the moment he walked through our front door, I knew he was different from any man Melody had ever brought around. He was tall, well-built, with dark hair neatly combed, and a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He took off his hat and extended his hand to me with a firm grip that spoke of honest work and good character. "It's an honor to meet you, sir," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "Melody's told me so much about you and Mrs. Marsh. What impressed me most was his manners." He kissed Rosalind's hand like a true gentleman, complimented our home, and showed genuine interest in my work at the plant. During dinner, he talked about his plans, his desire to build a stable family, and his traditional values. "Family is everything," he said, and I found myself nodding in complete agreement. Jasper came from good people up in Louisville. His father had been an accountant, his mother a school teacher, and he'd worked his way through engineering school with determination and sacrifice. He told us stories about his childhood, how he'd helped his father with bookkeeping, and how his mother had taught him to respect women. "A man who doesn't respect his wife isn't much of a man at all," he'd say, and I thought to myself that this young man had been raised right. What struck me most about Jasper was how he listened. When Melody talked about her work, he paid attention to every word. When I shared stories about the plant, he asked thoughtful questions. When Rosalind showed him her garden, he genuinely admired her roses and asked for advice about growing his own someday. Here was a man who understood that respect isn't just about saying the right words. It's about truly caring about the people around you. Over the following weeks, Jasper became a regular visitor to our home. He'd arrive every Sunday after church, always bringing something. Flowers for Rosalind, a newspaper for me, or homemade cookies from a bakery downtown. He never came empty-handed, never took our hospitality for granted. We'd sit on the front porch in the evenings, and he'd help me with small repairs around the house, refusing to let me pay him for his time. "Family helps family," he'd say with that sincere smile of his. That's what my daddy always taught me. The more time we spent with Jasper, the more I liked him. He had old-fashioned values in a modern world, treating Melody with the kind of respect and devotion that reminded me of my own courtship with Rosalind. When they'd sit together on our porch swing, I could see the genuine love in his eyes. Not just infatuation, but the deep, steady kind of love that builds lasting marriages. By the end of that first month, I found myself thinking that maybe God had finally sent our Melody the man she deserved. Little did I know that this same man who seemed like such a blessing would eventually become the source of our family's greatest heartbreak. During the months of courtship that followed, Jasper became more than just Melody's boyfriend. He became part of our family routine. Every weekend he'd show up at our door with that warm smile, ready to help with whatever needed doing. He'd mow our lawn without being asked, fix leaky faucets, and spend hours talking with me about everything from football to politics. Rosalind would cook his favorite meals, and he'd always insist on helping with the dishes afterward. "You raised me better than that Mrs. Marsh," he'd say when she tried to shoo him away from the kitchen sink. A man should always help clean up. When Jasper asked for Melody's hand in marriage, he did it exactly the way it should be done. He came to me privately one evening, sat in our living room, and spoke from his heart. "Mr. Marsh," he said, his voice steady but respectful, "I love your daughter more than life itself, and I'm asking for your permission to marry her. I promise you, I'll take care of her, protect her, and love her every day for the rest of my life." I shook his hand and welcomed him to the family with tears in my eyes. The proposal itself was perfect. He took Melody to the same park where they'd had their first official date, got down on one knee under the old oak tree, and presented her with a beautiful diamond ring that must have cost him months of savings. When she said yes, the whole neighborhood could probably hear her joyful screaming. The wedding was everything we'd dreamed of for our daughter, held at our Methodist church with Melody in a dress that made her look like an angel, and Jasper in a suit that made him look every inch the successful young man he was. The reception was at the community center with 300 guests, celebrating the union of two people who were clearly meant for each other. During his speech, Jasper thanked Rosalind and me for raising such an amazing woman, and promised to love Melody until my last breath leaves my body. After the honeymoon, they moved into a nice apartment just 15 minutes from our house, close enough that we could see each other regularly, but far enough to give them privacy as newlyweds. Jasper insisted on this arrangement, saying young couples needed to build their own traditions while staying connected to family. But what really showed me the kind of man Jasper was came about 6 months after the wedding. I'd been having trouble with my back, missing some work at the plant, and money was getting tight. Without saying a word to anyone, Jasper showed up one evening and handed me an envelope with $500 cash. "Just until you're back on your feet, Dad," he said. That was the first time he'd called me Dad, and it nearly broke me up. From that day forward, Jasper wasn't just my son-in-law. He was my son in every way that mattered. I gave him a key to our house, trusted him with our family secrets, and began to think of him as the heir to everything Rosalind and I had built. When people asked about my family, I'd proudly tell them about my daughter Melody and my son Jasper. Looking back now, I realize that was my biggest mistake, trusting him completely, loving him like my own blood, and never imagining that the man I considered my son would eventually betray that trust in the most devastating way possible. It was exactly 2 years ago when that blind trust I'd placed in Jasper began to develop its first hairline cracks. When you've been married to someone for 35 years, you know every gesture, every expression, every sigh they make. You notice when things start to change, even in the smallest ways. Rosalind began paying more attention to her appearance than she had in years. I'd find her standing in front of the bedroom mirror, longer in the mornings, trying on different outfits for simple trips to the grocery store. She started buying new clothes, nothing too fancy, but newer and more flattering than the comfortable house dresses she'd worn for decades. One morning I caught her applying lipstick just to water the garden, and when I asked about it, she just shrugged and said, "Can't a woman want to look nice for herself?" The hair salon visits became more frequent, too. What used to be a monthly trim turned into weekly appointments. She'd come home with her silver hair perfectly styled, her nails painted in colors I hadn't seen her wear since we were young. When neighbors complimented her new look, she'd blush like a schoolgirl and change the subject quickly. But what really started to bother me was Jasper's visiting pattern. He used to come by on weekends when Melody was with him, family dinners and Sunday afternoons. Now he was showing up during weekdays, always with some excuse. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on you folks. Or I picked up some groceries and figured you could use them. The strange thing was these visits always seemed to happen when Melody was working late or out with her girlfriends. "Where's Melody today?" I'd ask when he appeared at our door on a Tuesday afternoon. "Oh, she's got that big project at the office," he'd say, settling into our living room like he belonged there. "Figured I'd stop by and see if you needed any help around here." He'd stay for hours, sometimes chatting with Rosalind in the kitchen while I watched television in the living room. I could hear them talking in low voices, and when I'd walk in to get a glass of water, they'd stop mid-conversation or quickly change the subject to something mundane like the weather or grocery prices. Rosalind and Jasper had developed an odd kind of familiarity that made me uncomfortable. They'd share inside jokes I didn't understand, finish each other's sentences, and exchange glances that seemed to carry meaning I couldn't decipher. When I'd ask what they were talking about, Rosalind would wave her hand dismissively and say, "Oh, just family stuff, honey. Nothing important." The physical distance between Rosalind and me became more noticeable, too. She started going to bed earlier, claiming she was tired from her busy days. When I'd try to hold her hand while watching television, she'd find reasons to get up. Making tea, checking the locks, folding laundry that could have waited until morning. Our conversations became shorter, more superficial, like we were roommates instead of husband and wife. One evening I found them both looking at something on Jasper's phone heads close together, laughing at whatever they were seeing. When I approached, Jasper quickly put the phone away and said it was just a funny video his coworker had sent. But I'd seen the way Rosalind's face flushed, the way she stepped back from him just a little too quickly. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. Maybe I was just being paranoid, reading too much into innocent interactions between family members. After all, Jasper was our son-in-law, practically our son. It was natural that he'd be comfortable in our home, natural that Rosalind would enjoy his company. But deep in my gut, I knew something had shifted in the dynamics of our family, and it was making me more uneasy with each passing day. Instead of brushing off those nagging feelings, I decided to start paying closer attention to what was happening in my own house. 35 years of marriage had taught me to trust my gut when something felt off. So I began really watching the people I loved most in this world. The first thing I noticed was how protective Rosalind had become of her phone. She used to leave it anywhere, kitchen counter, coffee table, charging by her bedside. Now she carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom. When it rang, she'd rush to answer it, stepping into another room to talk. If I asked who called, she'd give vague answers. "Oh, just Susan from church," or the doctor's office. But I knew the difference between casual conversation and something secretive. These calls made her voice change. Softer, more careful, like she was afraid someone might overhear. The text messages were even more telling. I'd see her phone light up and she'd practically lunge for it, her face lighting up in ways I hadn't seen in years. When I'd glance over, she'd quickly close whatever she was reading. "Important message," I'd ask. "Just Melody telling me about her day." She'd lie, but I knew Melody's texting habits. These messages that made Rosalind smile so secretively were clearly something else entirely. Jasper's behavior became more suspicious too. During his visits, he and Rosalind would find excuses to talk privately. She'd ask him to help in the garage, or he'd offer to fix something on the back deck. They'd disappear for 20 or 30 minutes, and when they returned, there'd be an uncomfortable energy between them. I started testing them, making unexpected appearances when they thought I was occupied. I'd pretend to nap, then quietly walk toward wherever they were talking. Every single time, their conversation would stop abruptly the moment they sensed me approaching. They'd be standing too far apart, looking too casual, like actors caught rehearsing lines. The coldness between Rosalind and me grew more pronounced. She stopped initiating physical contact. No more casual touches, no more sitting close during television. When I'd reach for her hand, she'd find reasons to pull away. When I'd try to kiss her goodnight, she'd turn her head, so my lips barely grazed her cheek. "Are you feeling all right, honey?" I asked one night. "You seem different lately." She tensed up like I'd accused her of something. "I'm fine, Alaric, just tired." But we both knew that was a lie. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon when I came home early from a doctor's appointment. I heard voices in the kitchen, Rosalind's and Jasper's, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I stood in the hallway straining to hear, but they were being careful. All I could make out were fragments. Can't keep. And he's starting to. And we need to be more careful. When I walked into the kitchen, they sprang apart like teenagers caught making out. Jasper suddenly became very interested in our refrigerator, and Rosalind busied herself wiping spotless counters. "Didn't expect you back so soon," Rosalind said, not meeting my eyes. "Doctor was running ahead of schedule," I replied, watching their faces. "What were you two discussing so seriously?" "Just talking about Melody's birthday next month," Jasper said quickly. "Planning a surprise party." But Melody's birthday wasn't for another 4 months, and I was pretty sure they both knew I knew that. That night, lying in bed next to my wife of 35 years, I finally admitted what I'd been trying to deny. Something was definitely going on between Rosalind and Jasper, and I needed concrete proof before I could do anything about it. 6 months ago, I made the decision that changed everything between doubt and certainty. I couldn't keep living with suspicions eating away at my peace of mind. If something was really going on between my wife and the man I considered my son, I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would either confirm my worst fears or put them to rest once and for all. The opportunity came on a Tuesday morning when Rosalind went to her weekly hair appointment and Jasper was at work. I had the house to myself for the first time in weeks, and I knew this might be my only chance to search for answers. My hands were shaking as I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I started with her dresser, the antique piece that had belonged to her grandmother. The top drawers held the usual things: jewelry, scarves, reading glasses. But when I reached the bottom drawer, where she kept her personal items, my fingers found something that shouldn't have been there. Hidden beneath her nightgowns, wrapped in a silk scarf I'd given her for Christmas, was an envelope. My heart was pounding as I pulled out the letter inside. The handwriting was unmistakably Jasper's. I'd seen it on birthday cards for years. But this wasn't a casual family note. "My dearest Rosalind," it began, and those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. "Every moment away from you feels like an eternity. Yesterday, when we met at the park when you told me you loved me, I felt like I could touch the stars. I know this is complicated. I know we're hurting people we care about, but what we have is real. It's more real than anything I've ever felt in my life." I had to sit down on the edge of our bed, the bed where Rosalind and I had slept together for 30 years, where we'd conceived our daughter. Now I was reading a love letter from another man written to my wife, hidden in the drawer, where she kept her most intimate things. The letter continued, "I think about your smile, the way you laugh at my jokes, how beautiful you look when you don't think anyone is watching. I know you feel guilty about Alaric, and I understand. He's a good man, and he doesn't deserve this. But we can't help what our hearts want. Can we soon? We'll be able to stop hiding, stop pretending. Soon we can be together, the way we're meant to be." The date at the top was from 2 weeks earlier. This wasn't some old mistake. This was current, ongoing, deliberate. They were actively planning a future together while I went about my daily life, completely oblivious to the betrayal happening under my own roof. But what made my blood run cold was the final paragraph. "I've been thinking about what you said about the house and the savings account. You're right that timing will be everything. Once we take care of the practical matters, we can start fresh somewhere new. Maybe that little place we talked about in Tennessee. I love you more than words can say, and I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." I read that letter 3 times, each reading making the reality sink deeper. This wasn't just an affair. They had some kind of plan involving our house and savings, though I couldn't yet understand exactly what they meant by practical matters. They weren't just betraying my heart. They were plotting something that involved our entire life together. I carefully folded the letter and put it back exactly where I'd found it, but those words were burned into my memory forever. As I heard Rosalind's car pulling into the driveway, I realized my suspicions had been just the tip of the iceberg. What I'd discovered was proof of an ongoing love affair with mysterious plans for a future together, but I sensed there were deeper layers of deception I hadn't yet uncovered. After finding that letter, I couldn't shake the feeling that what I'd discovered was just the surface of something much bigger. Those vague references to practical matters and the house and savings account kept haunting me. There was more to this betrayal than just an affair. I could feel it in my bones. So I continued watching, listening, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The breakthrough came 3 months ago on a Wednesday afternoon when I had supposedly left for my weekly visit to the Veterans Clinic. Instead, I parked around the corner and walked back to the house using my key to enter quietly through the back door. I could hear Rosalind talking on the phone in the living room, her voice carrying that same secretive tone I'd grown to recognize. I crept closer, staying in the hallway where I could hear but remain unseen. What I heard next made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. "Yes, everything is going according to plan," Rosalind was saying. "I'm going to suggest to him that we sell the house. Tell him it's too big for two older people. He trusts me completely with financial decisions, always has. The realtor says we can easily get $300,000 for it, maybe more in this market." There was a pause while she listened to whoever was on the other end, and I had a pretty good idea who that was. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," she continued. "I've been planting seeds about downsizing, about how we don't need all this space anymore. Once we sell, I'll suggest we put the money in a joint account temporarily, while we look for something smaller. That's when you and I can make our move." My legs felt weak. I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. The house that I'd worked 30 years to pay off the home where we'd raised our daughter, where I'd planned to spend my retirement years. She was plotting to steal it from under me. "I know it seems cruel." Rosalind's voice took on a softer tone. "But we deserve to be happy. Don't we? Alaric's a good man, but he's set in his ways. He'd never understand what we have together. This way he'll still have enough money to get by, just not enough to come looking for us." The casual way she discussed destroying my life, leaving me with just enough to get by after 35 years of marriage, hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. This wasn't just adultery. This was calculated theft, a con game that had been in the works for who knows how long. "Tennessee will be perfect for us," she continued. "That little house you showed me online is exactly what I've always dreamed of. And with $300,000, we can live comfortably while you build up your engineering business there. A fresh start for both of us." I heard her laugh. Actually laugh at something the person on the other end said. Here she was planning to rob me blind, and she was enjoying it. The woman I'd loved, cherished, and provided for all these years was treating my financial ruin like it was some kind of romantic adventure. "Don't worry about Melody," Rosalind said, and my daughter's name made me clench my fist. "She'll be upset at first, but she's young and resilient. She'll understand eventually that people grow apart, that her mother deserves happiness too. Besides, once we're settled in Tennessee, maybe she can come visit." The conversation wrapped up with promises of love and assurances that everything would work out perfectly. When I heard Rosalind hang up the phone, I quietly slipped back out through the rear door and sat in my truck for 20 minutes, shaking with a mixture of rage and devastation. Now I knew the full scope of their betrayal. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning to steal my life savings, abandon me in my old age, and run off together to start fresh, with money I'd spent decades earning. That night, staring at the ceiling while Rosalind slept peacefully beside me, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be anyone's victim. It was time to turn the tables and catch them in the act. The plan I devised was simple, but effective. If I was going to catch them red-handed, I needed to create the perfect opportunity for them to let their guard down completely. I'd spent weeks thinking it through, considering every angle, every possible way it could go wrong. But I knew that if I was going to confront this betrayal, I needed irrefutable proof that even they couldn't deny or explain away. I told Rosalind that I had to go to Nashville for a 3-day business conference. Something about new safety regulations at manufacturing plants that all retired supervisors needed to attend. It was a believable lie because I'd attended similar seminars before, and Nashville was far enough away that she wouldn't expect me to drive home each night. "That's a shame, honey," she said when I broke the news to her over breakfast. 3 whole days away. But I caught something in her eyes when she said it. Not disappointment, but a flash of excitement that she tried to hide behind a sympathetic smile. She was already planning how to use those 3 days, and we both knew it. I made a show of packing my overnight bag, complaining about having to sit through boring presentations and sleep in an uncomfortable hotel bed. Rosalind played her part, perfectly fussing over whether I'd packed enough clean shirts and reminding me to call her every evening. Anyone watching would have seen a caring wife seeing her husband off on a tedious business trip. But instead of driving to Nashville, I went straight to the Comfort Inn, just 10 minutes from our house. It was a small, discreet place where I could pay cash and where nobody would recognize me. I registered under a false name and requested a room on the second floor with a view of the parking lot. Not because I cared about the scenery, but because it would give me a clear line of sight to anyone coming or going. The first day passed quietly. I spent most of it sitting by the window, watching the road that led to our neighborhood, fighting the urge to drive home and pretend none of this was happening. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that maybe Rosalind would spend those 3 days missing me, calling friends, watching television alone like a faithful wife should. But I knew better. I'd seen the evidence, heard the phone conversation. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was preparation for the inevitable confrontation that would change all our lives forever. The second day dragged by with agonizing slowness. I barely ate, couldn't concentrate on the television, couldn't even read the newspaper I'd bought. Every car that passed made my heart race, wondering if it was Jasper heading to my house for a secret rendezvous with my wife. By evening, I was questioning whether I was doing the right thing, whether some truths were better left buried. But Friday afternoon changed everything. At 4:30, I saw Jasper's silver pickup truck turn down our street. I grabbed the binoculars I'd bought and watched as he parked in our driveway, not even trying to hide his presence bold as brass. He walked up to our front door like he owned the place, and I saw Rosalind open it before he even had a chance to knock. She must have been watching for him. The way she greeted him told me everything I needed to know. There was no hesitation, no looking around to see if neighbors were watching. She stepped aside to let him in, and I caught a glimpse of her face in profile. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen her smile at me in years. I sat in that hotel room for another hour watching his truck in our driveway, knowing what was happening inside the house I'd worked 30 years to pay for. My hands were shaking as I got dressed, checked my appearance in the mirror, and prepared for the confrontation that would either destroy my marriage or confirm that it was already dead. It was time to go home and face the truth, whatever the consequences might be. I drove home with my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. The 10-minute drive from the hotel felt both eternal and far too short. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that I'd find some innocent explanation for Jasper's truck in my driveway. But deep down, I knew what I was about to discover would change everything forever. I parked on the street instead of pulling into the driveway, not wanting to alert them to my presence. Using my house key as quietly as possible, I slipped through the front door and immediately froze. The sounds coming from upstairs made my stomach drop to my feet. Sounds I recognized but hadn't heard in my own home for months. Sounds that belonged to intimacy, to passion, to two people who definitely weren't worried about being caught. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my weight, despite my efforts to move silently. The sounds grew clearer, more unmistakable with every step I climbed. It was Rosalind's voice, but expressing pleasure in ways she hadn't with me in years. Mixed with it was a man's voice, deeper, younger, more urgent than mine had ever been. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw that our bedroom door was closed. Our bedroom. The room where Rosalind and I had shared 35 years of marriage, where we'd conceived our daughter, where we'd whispered our dreams and fears to each other in the darkness. Now it was locked against me while my wife shared it with another man. The rage that had been building for months finally exploded. I raised my fist and pounded on that door with all the fury of a man whose entire life had been stolen from him. Rosalind opened this door right now. The sound stopped, instantly replaced by a silence so complete it was deafening. Then I heard frantic movement, scrambling, whispered panic, the sound of people desperately trying to make themselves presentable. "Alaric!" Rosalind's voice came through the door, high-pitched with terror. "Wait, it's not what you think. Open the damn door!" I roared, pounding harder. The wooden frame shook under my assault, but the lock held firm. When they didn't respond, I stepped back and threw my full weight against the door. The lock was old, installed more for privacy than security, and on the third impact it gave way with a splintering crash that echoed through the house. The scene that greeted me was exactly what I had expected, and somehow still more devastating than I could have imagined. Rosalind stood beside our bed, clutching a sheet around herself, her hair disheveled, and her face flushed with guilt and fear. Jasper was frantically pulling on his pants, his shirt still on the floor, looking like a teenager caught by an angry father. "Mr. Marsh," Jasper stammered, his voice shaking, "I can explain this." "Explain what?" I cut him off, my voice deadly calm, now that the moment had finally arrived. "Explain how you've been screwing my wife in my own bed. Explain how you've been planning to steal my house and run off to Tennessee together." The color drained from both their faces. They hadn't expected me to know about the financial conspiracy, and seeing their shock confirmed everything I'd suspected. "How long?" I demanded, looking directly at Rosalind. "How long has this been going on?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "Alaric, please let me explain." "How long?" I repeated, my voice rising. 2 years, she whispered, and those 2 words hit me like physical blows. "But it wasn't supposed to happen this way. We never meant to hurt you." 2 years. 2 years of lies, 2 years of betrayal, 2 years of planning my destruction while I trusted them both completely. 2 years of them laughing at the foolish old man who worked hard to provide for the people who were plotting to rob him blind. Jasper had finished dressing and was edging toward the door like a cornered animal looking for escape. "Mr. Marsh, if we could just sit down and talk about this like adults." "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my house right now, and if I ever see you near my family again, I'll kill you." He didn't need to be told twice. Jasper practically ran from the room, and I heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs, followed by the slam of the front door and the roar of his truck engine as he fled like the coward he'd always been underneath that charming exterior. That left me alone with Rosalind, the woman I'd loved for 35 years, standing in our destroyed bedroom, with the evidence of her betrayal still hanging in the air between us. The hours that followed were the most difficult of my entire life. After Jasper fled like the coward he was, I stood in that destroyed bedroom facing Rosalind, but I couldn't bear to look at her. The woman I'd loved for 35 years had become a stranger, and I knew our marriage was over. But before I could deal with my own shattered heart, I had to face the hardest task of all, telling our daughter that her world was about to come crashing down. Melody was the innocent victim in all of this. She had no idea that the man she'd married, the man she trusted and loved, had been betraying her with her own mother. The thought of destroying her happiness, of shattering her faith in the people she loved most, made me physically sick. But she deserved to know the truth before she heard it from someone else. At 7 o'clock that evening, I picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed Melody's number. My voice was steady when she answered, but inside, I was falling apart. "Melody," I said, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice, "I need you to come home right away. It's urgent." "Dad, what's wrong?" The concern in her voice nearly broke me. "Is Mom okay? Are you having health problems?" "Just come home, sweetheart. We need to talk about something very important." "You're scaring me, Dad. What's going on?" "Please just come. I'll explain everything when you get here." 30 minutes later, I heard her key in the front door. "Dad, Mom," she called out, her voice echoing through the house. "What's this emergency about?" Why did Jasper call me crying and hang up without explaining anything? My heart sank. That coward had already tried to manipulate her, probably attempting to control the narrative before I could tell her the truth. "Sit down, honey," I said, gesturing to the living room couch. "What I'm about to tell you is going to hurt, but you need to hear it from me." I told her everything, from the first suspicious signs I'd noticed 2 years ago to finding the love letter, to overhearing the phone conversation about stealing our house, to finally catching them together in our bedroom just hours earlier. I watched my daughter's face change with every word I spoke, seeing her disbelief transform into horror, then into the kind of deep, soul-crushing pain that no parent ever wants to inflict on their child. "No," she whispered when I finished, tears streaming down her face. Jasper wouldn't do that. Mom wouldn't do that. There has to be some mistake. I saw the Melody. I heard everything. I'm sorry, but there's no mistake. She broke down completely, then sobbing with the kind of raw anguish that comes from having your entire world torn apart. I held her while she cried, this beautiful daughter who had always been the light of our lives, now devastated by the selfishness of the two people who should have protected her most. How could they do this to us? She kept asking through her tears. How could Mom betray you like this? How could Jasper betray me? I didn't have answers for her. I was asking myself the same questions. When she finally composed herself enough to speak clearly, her voice was different. Harder, more determined than I'd ever heard it before. I'm divorcing him, she said firmly. I can't stay married to a man who would do this to his own family. And I can't forgive Mom for what she's done to you, to all of us. Are you sure, honey? This is a big decision. Maybe you should take some time to think about it. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she replied. I won't be married to a man who has no honor, no loyalty, no respect for the people who loved him. The next morning I called a divorce attorney. I had clear evidence of adultery, financial conspiracy, and betrayal of trust. The lawyer assured me that with the proof I had, the divorce would be straightforward and favorable to me. 3 months of legal proceedings followed. Rosalind tried to fight it at first, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. Melody filed for her own divorce the same week, and Jasper, coward that he was, didn't even contest it. He simply disappeared from Lexington entirely, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 families he'd helped destroy. When the legal dust finally settled after 3 months of divorce proceedings, I found myself completely alone for the first time in 35 years. The judge ruled in my favor. The evidence was overwhelming. Rosalind was ordered to leave with only her personal belongings, and I kept the house and savings account. Melody made the decision that broke my heart again. She couldn't stay in Lexington. Too many memories of the life she'd thought she had with Jasper. She took a job transfer to Atlanta, needing distance from everything that had happened. I love you, Dad, she said through tears as she hugged me goodbye. But I need time to heal, and I can't do that here. I understand, sweetheart, I replied, though it felt like losing the last piece of my family. Rosalind moved out on a gray Tuesday morning while I was at the hardware store. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a note. I'm sorry. 35 years of marriage reduced to 2 words. Jasper had vanished completely. Word around town was he'd left Kentucky entirely, probably headed to Tennessee, just like they'd planned, but alone now. Good riddance to both of them. The silence in that house was deafening. Every room held memories of the family we'd been. I'd come home and automatically call out, I'm home, only to be answered by empty echoes. I'd set the table for 2 out of habit, then put away the extra plate with shaking hands. The depression hit me like a freight train. I'd wake up with no reason to get out of bed, no one depending on me. I stopped shaving, stopped cooking. Real meals lived on frozen dinners and whatever I could microwave. The television became my only companion, filling the oppressive quiet. My neighbors tried to help at first. Mrs. Henderson brought casseroles and made small talk, but I could see the pity in her eyes. Everyone knew what had happened. Small towns don't keep secrets. I became the object of sympathetic looks and whispered conversations, the poor old man whose wife ran off with his son-in-law. Sleep became my escape, but even that was tormented by dreams of better times. Sunday dinners with Melody and Jasper, Rosalind laughing at my jokes, the life I'd thought we had. I'd wake up reaching for her side of the bed, only to remember she was gone. The worst part was the complete isolation. Melody called once a week, but our conversations were stilted and painful. She was rebuilding her own life and didn't need her father's depression weighing her down. Work friends had already drifted away after retirement, and this scandal made social situations awkward for everyone. 4 months into this miserable existence, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror one morning and didn't recognize the man staring back. Gray stubble covered hollow cheeks. My eyes were sunken and lifeless, and I'd lost so much weight my clothes hung loose. I looked like a ghost, haunting my own life. This has got to stop, I said to my reflection. Either you start living again, or you might as well lie down and die right here. That afternoon, I forced myself to shower, shave, and put on clean clothes. Then I walked outside into the Kentucky sunshine for the first time in weeks and started walking down the street, one step at a time, towards something that might eventually resemble a life worth living again. Those daily walks became my lifeline back to the world of the living. At first, I could barely make it around the block without feeling exhausted, but gradually, I built up my strength and my courage to venture further from home. After a few weeks of walking through my neighborhood, I decided to drive downtown to explore parts of Lexington I hadn't visited in years. Downtown had changed since my working days. New restaurants and shops had opened. Young professionals walked the sidewalks with purpose, and there was an energy there that made me feel less alone in the world. I found myself drawn to the area, parking near the courthouse and walking the tree-lined streets, watching life happen around me instead of hiding from it. It was on one of these downtown walks about 6 months after I'd started my recovery that I discovered a small coffee shop called The Daily Grind, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The place had a warm, inviting atmosphere that reminded me of simpler times, with mismatched furniture and local artwork covering the walls. I decided to go in and treat myself to a real cup of coffee instead of the instant stuff I'd been drinking at home. The woman sitting at the corner table caught my attention immediately, not because she was trying to draw attention to herself, but because she seemed so peacefully content reading her book while sipping tea. She appeared to be about 60 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a simple style and reading glasses perched on her nose. There was something elegant about her, a quiet dignity that made me think of the kind of woman my mother would have called a real lady. When our eyes met accidentally, she smiled, not the pitying smile I'd grown accustomed to from neighbors, but a genuine, warm expression that made me feel human again. "Excuse me," I found myself saying, surprising myself with my boldness. "I don't mean to intrude, but aren't you the lady I've seen walking in Gratz Park in the mornings?" "Yes, that's me," she replied with a soft laugh. "And you're the gentleman who's been walking downtown these past few weeks. I've noticed you seem to enjoy the historic district as much as I do." Her name was Marlene Porter, and she'd been widowed for 3 years after losing her husband to cancer. We talked for an hour that first day, and I found myself sharing more about my recent difficulties than I'd intended. She listened without judgment, nodding with understanding when I mentioned the loneliness of an empty house and the challenge of rebuilding a life at our age. "It's funny how we can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone," she said. "After Harold died, I thought I'd never want to talk to another human being again. But isolation isn't healing. It's just another kind of prison." That conversation became the first of many. We began meeting at the Daily Grind twice a week, then daily, then eventually we'd take walks together through the historic district, sharing stories about our past lives and our hopes for whatever future we might have left. Marlene had a wisdom born from her own suffering, but she'd emerged from her grief with grace and strength intact. She encouraged me to talk about melody, to process my anger at Rosalind and Jasper, and to forgive myself for the trust that had been betrayed. She never pushed, never judged, just offered the kind of companionship I'd forgotten existed. Over the months, what started as friendship slowly deepened into something more. Not the passionate romance of youth, but something richer. A partnership between two people who understood loss, valued honesty, and weren't afraid of starting over. A year after we first met, Marlene suggested something that changed both our lives. We're both rattling around in houses too big for one person, spending too much time alone. What if we tried sharing one of them? We chose her smaller house, and I sold the one that held too many painful memories. Moving in together felt like stepping into a new chapter of life I'd never expected to write. One filled with quiet conversations, shared meals, and the simple comfort of not being alone anymore. Today, as I sit here writing these words, 3 years after my world came crashing down, I can honestly say that I'm happier than I've been in decades. I'm 66 years old now, living in a cozy house filled with sunlight and laughter with Marlene, and life is good again. Just a few months ago, I received a phone call that meant everything to me. It was Melody, my daughter, calling through tears from Atlanta. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I need to ask for your forgiveness. I've been so angry at you for destroying my marriage that I forgot you were a victim too. I am sorry for abandoning you when you needed me most." I cried like a baby hearing those words. For 3 years I'd carried guilt about hurting my daughter by revealing the truth. Hearing her apology lifted a weight from my heart I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. "You never lost me, sweetheart," I told her. "I've been here waiting for you all along." Now Melody visits us every month, and I watch her laugh with Marlene in the kitchen like old friends. My little girl is healing, learning to trust again, and seeing her smile reminds me that this true story isn't just about betrayal. It's about resilience. If you ask me what I've learned from all this pain, I'd tell you that betrayal hurts, but it doesn't have to kill you. It's never too late to start over. Forgiveness is for yourself, not for the people who hurt you. And real love can come at any age when you least expect it, but need it most. With Marlene, I don't have the crazy passion in my 20s, but I have something far more valuable. Companionship, understanding, respect, and tenderness that makes every day worth living. These grandpa stories might sound like something from another era, but love and betrayal are timeless human experiences every generation faces. To those of you listening who might be going through something similar, don't give up. The pain you're feeling today isn't permanent. Hearts heal, life goes on, and happiness has a way of surprising you when you're ready to receive it. Don't let someone else's betrayal define the rest of your story. This true story taught me that we older folks have rights too. The right to dignity, financial security, and honest relationships. Too often, society overlooks the struggles of people our age, but our stories matter. Our pain is real, and our capacity for new beginnings shouldn't be underestimated. God put Marlene in my path when I needed her most, showing me that His love never arrives too late. Even when people we trust fail us, there's always hope for redemption and new chapters. These grandpa stories of heartbreak and healing aren't unique to me. Many families face similar betrayals, financial manipulation, and struggles to rebuild after devastating losses. These grandpa stories of resilience happen more often than you think, but they don't always get the attention they deserve. As I close this true story, I want to leave you with this. While you have breath in your lungs, you have the chance to be happy again. While you have a heartbeat, you have the opportunity to love and be loved. The best chapters of your life might still be waiting to be written. If this story touched your heart, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It helps me know I'm not alone in this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories that prove it's never too late for a second chance at happiness. Life continues, love returns, and hope never dies.